and welcome back. Our first conversation this morning is with our circle as the representatives of our circle discuss the Equality Fellowship 2022. That being said, we have with us in studio this morning Denae Fairweather. She's the board president for our circle. Good morning, Denae.
Good morning.
We also have joining us virtually this morning Derricia Castillo-Salazar. She's the managing director of our circle. Good morning, Derricia.
Good morning.
Hi, morning.
All right.
Let's begin first of all by getting an understanding of our circle and what is its purpose and how it was founded.
Okay, so our circle is the primary organization or the primary NGO that focuses on the advancing equality for LGBT formed families or families formed by LGBT persons in Belize. So that is one of our primary targets for our circle. We focus on any issues facing LGBT families, persons living within those families, and how can we address the issues that these families are facing.
How did this all come to be? How did the concept of creating this organization and manifesting it become?
I think Derricia is the
Let's
best
go, Derricia.
Well, as one of the co-founders of our circle, we were in an era where we felt as if though the work that was being done for LGBT persons was being done individually. Majority of it was being done from a health perspective. And we found that when it came to relationships, when it came to family, that wasn't a conversation that was being done or being acknowledged for LGBT persons here in Belize. So it was myself and my partner at the time, Mr. Paul Schmidt, and his partner at the time, and Ms. Rashani Zagiri and her partner at the time, who decided that we wanted to create a space where it was more than just our health issues, where it was more than just coming from an angle of oppression or not being included or not being inclusive. And we formed our circle as a small social group for LGBT couples, which eventually allowed us to do a study in 2017 where we were able to generate data, small data, baseline data that we've used in our advocacy, where we were able to outline that over 100 LGBT couples were raising children within Belize. And we started doing research into what that meant for us. And from that research, we started to realize that there were several legislations which governed families, which governed couples, which looked beyond just the basic inclusion as persons, but looking at us as a family, a unit, a group of people who are sharing assets, who are investing time, energy, and money in each other, and realizing that majority of the legislations which were in place to protect couples and families did not give the opportunity for our families or couples to be protected. At that time, when we started our circle, we realized that majority of our we don't call it membership, we call it volunteers. Majority of our volunteers were within the public sector, were paying social security, were pensionable, and because of the way that our families were created, we would not be afforded the same protection and opportunity as our heterosexual counterparts. So from that, our circle officially formalized, and we launched our NGO presence by creating the legal guidebook for LGBT Belizeans, where we looked at the legislations which exist, the legislations which protected families and couples in Belize. And we tried to see if there was any way for our families and our couples to be protected. However, and it's still an argument to this day if Belize does have an anti-discrimination legislation or if there's any anti-discrimination protection. However, the reality of the situation is because of how our relationships and families are made up, there's not much protection for us. There's not much protection for children. So that's where we are now here at our circle, looking at those policies and legislations and how we can promote a level of change or legal reform in order for families or children and our partners to be protected.
A few questions, right? The first one, an organization such as this, I presume, faces a lot of stigma and certain controversies. When you look at the traditional way in which families are set up, so to speak, right? You have a heterosexual environment where you're raising children. Now, this kind of arrangement is different, right? Where you have parents who are of the same sex.
Right.
How do you guys deal with the outside forces, so to speak, who are firm in their position and their beliefs that the family or the home should be created or should be fostered in such a way where you're dealing with man and woman raising children?
Well, one of the things I always tell people is, yes, that is what a lot of us might like to think of as a traditional family. But what we're really doing is we are just bringing to light the families that already exist. These are families that exist already, they have existed, and we are just allowing them to be represented. And this traditional nuclear family of one man and one woman, that is actually something that is not very common in Belize. And we see a lot of different family structures. We see single parents, we see grandparents raising their grandchildren, we see older siblings raising the younger siblings, we see neighbors, aunties, uncles coming together and raising other people's children, and we see a lot of that. So we see a lot of diverse family structures, right? And so it's not something that's very foreign. It's not something that's
nuclear
very
family
new.
It's taboo in a manner of speaking.
Right. Yeah. So our families that we represent would fall right into that, into those categories of those diverse family structures. It's not something that we are new to in this country. The only difference is, well, it might be two women, two men, one woman, one man, whatever the case is.
So then talk about the reasons for legislation reform then, or revising, because for the if this is the nature or the family set up for so long, in the sense that it's diverse, it's not not as nuclear mommy daddy as we would like to think, do those families then fall under the same line of what you all are trying to protect?
Some of them do. A lot of them do. A lot of people, if you are a step parent or if you adopt children and things like that, a lot of these legislations would affect your family.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then
Go ahead.
An interesting thing, especially in the introduction of our legal guidebook, what we made mention to is that although it is, the cover of the book says that it is a legal guidebook for LGBT persons here in Belize, we encourage single parents to read that guidebook. We encourage these diverse families to read that guidebook, because sometimes it's not until something happens that they realize that, you know what, we weren't as protected as we are. What we see here in Belize, and even with our Caribbean counterparts, is that everybody's comfortable in their now, but it's only when tragedy hits that people realize, oh, well, I didn't know I wouldn't have access to their social security benefits. I didn't know I wouldn't be able to qualify as a beneficiary from their insurance. I didn't know that the pension wouldn't cover their stepchildren. So for us, while we're bringing it and have crafted it in a way that our LGBT persons would become more aware, a lot of these discrepancies and discrimination, which is riddled in our legislation, applies to beyond LGBT persons.
Talk to us about then how our circle is engaging with these other families that are not necessarily LGBTQ families, and then how you all come together to kind of address the stigma that lives in our society?
Well, while our focus is primarily LGBT families, and we will always be open in saying that is our primary focus, we always will tell people that a lot of our services that we offer is open to any family that might not be considered that traditional nuclear family, or what we might think is that traditional nuclear one man, one woman. And so we do tell people who might fall somewhere in that diverse family that these services are available to them, and that they should familiarize themselves with the legislation, with the guidebook, so that they can be aware of how they would be affected.
Okay, so let's get into the fellowship, right? Let's talk about that, because I know Derricia has to log off soon. Yes, so speak to us about what it is and why we are even addressing it right now.
Right. So the fellowship, this is an initiative supported by the Canada Fund for Local Initiatives, and it was actually an offshoot of the Human Rights Defenders Project, which was a project funded by the British High Commission and the Fondo Centro Americano de Mujeres, and supported by Beltrade. Sorry, it's a long name. But a lot of people are familiar. They're based in Central America. So that particular project was to strengthen the capacity of human rights defenders in Belize. But what we saw the need for was to bring human rights advocates together, because we have so many different advocates and so many different advocacy groups, and they're doing a lot of great work, right? But what we think is important is for us to bring those efforts together and to collaborate, because one of the important things about advocacy is to remember the intersectionalities. While I may be representing one group and somebody else might be representing another group, within our groups, we might have people who fall within those two categories or within those vulnerable communities. And so it's very important as advocates to come together and see how our joint efforts will make a larger impact. So that's one of the main reasons for us starting the fellowship.
Okay. So this is something that you all are carrying out. This is not something like an initiative that comes from outside. This is an Our Circle initiative. Okay, so
I think I would want to say it's more than an Our Circle initiative, because from the project which Denae referred to, the Strengthening Human Rights Defenders, we had independent advocates, we had sexual reproductive and health advocates from BFLA, we had human members from the Human Rights Commission. We had different advocates coming together, and from there creating that need. What Our Circle did was just identify funding, refine the concept, and identify ways for us to actually make it happen. So I think we'd be doing the participants from the previous project we would be diminishing their input on the creation of this project by saying it's just an Our Circle project. It's a group of human rights defenders who came together and saw the need that we needed to identify a way to work together, to identify a way to find common ground for us to move forward with the work that we do.
How does an initiative such as this improve the state of affairs or quality of life for persons who fall within this category?
Well, with this fellowship, the interesting thing is the way that it was actually designed. We are looking at having discussion and discourse, which would pretty much cover the basics of advocacy, looking at advocacy steps, looking at how to engage stakeholders and policymakers, as well as looking at how they can understand and appreciate the human rights structures which already exist. So the fellowship has three components, which is the discussion and discourse, where we're not going to insult anyone's intelligence and teach them how to be advocates, but pretty much to discuss best practices in different areas, as well as looking at field visits for different human rights structures that exist. And the even more interesting thing is the part where these fellows will come together, identify amongst themselves areas that they would like to champion, and then having a lobbying day. So what we will see is at the end of this fellowship, while funding may be finished, we will already have had the wheel moving from the lobbying day, where we've identified areas where we want to champion collectively. So it's still not us saying, you know, we want to champion women's rights, children's rights, LGBT rights. It would be the fellows coming together after identifying our intersectionality and saying, okay, well, this is something that we can see common between all of us here, and this is what we want to champion. And sometimes it's just taking that coordination for us to be able to move a bit further, a bit more structured, and of course create that impact that we can't do alone.
So tell us when is this initiative taking place, and who all is going to be a part of it? Or are you inviting the general public to be a part of it?
Okay, so the deadline has actually been extended to the 27th of August. It was originally the 20th, but we have extended it to the 27th. And then the week after that, we will start the interviews to vet the applicants. And so we are looking to start about the first week in September.
Okay.
And who qualifies is anybody who sees themselves as an advocate, who wants to champion these initiatives, who fall within the age range of 20 to 35 years.
Okay.
old. So we are targeting a younger group of people. We are primarily targeting young people who are young to advocacy and new to advocacy, to see some new fresh faces in the advocacy realm.
Is this like a 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, weekly?
It's continuous
process.
So the fellowship lasts for 6 months.
Okay.
And so the discourse and discussions that Derricia mentioned, those will be kind of spread out across those 6 months. If I'm not mistaken, it's about 8 discussions every 3 weeks or something like that. So it's spread out. And then there's also the field visits that will be spread out in between. And these field visits will be to different human rights organizations. And we have with that the support of the NAC, the National AIDS Commission, the Human Rights Commission, the National Women's Commission. And so they field visits and the discourse and discussion. And there will also be some one-on-one conversations with the fellows and advisors, so to speak, or people coordinating the project throughout that 6 months.
So, because it's a fellowship, right? Do I get something when I'm done, like a certificate, a diploma, or do I just get like bragging rights?
You definitely get bragging rights, but we will give a certificate at the end, and it is also free to apply. It is free to sign up.
So it's like a certificate of completion that you've undergone this particular course?
Correct. So once you have completed, I can't recall what's the exact number, but you have to complete majority of the sections. So if it's 8 field visits, I believe you have to do at least 6 of those, not field visits, the discussions to complete. So once you have finished majority of the work, the fellowship, you will get a certificate of completion.
Okay, so September you said?
September.
And it's for 6 months?
6 months.
All right, so when they're done, you'll come back again and talk to us about it.
Definitely.
Perfect. Well, Denae, thank you so much for coming
so much
in. I know Derricia had to leave, but please give her our thanks as well.
Sure.
And we hope that all goes well with the fellowship.
Thank you for having me.
And with that, we're going to take our next break, and when we get back, we have our second segment with the Queen of the Bay. So stay tuned.